we are basically going to be going to this website right here called Linktree. Was it? Linktree. Yeah. So Linktree is basically kind of let's see what kind of it is. We'll learn about your branded. Okay, so it seems like a business kind of growing software, essentially. And you're currently tasked to critique it in three categories. First is basic visual design principles. Okay, can anyone give me some examples of basic visual design principles or what it is? Contrast, good. So contrast is like the difference in I guess emphasis between two elements. So see, we have a black background here, but we have white text, so that's high contrast. So it's really easy to discern it. What other visual things do you consider are important to in which order the user is directed to look at? Yeah, that's something to consider. That might be more allocated with visual hierarchy, actually, more specifically. But it, yeah, actually can go into visual design principles. Actually, they kind of overlap a lot, honestly. Okay. Size, yeah, good. Size of elements, ordering of elements. For example, like you notice that these are all in grids and it's very responsive as a result. So if I minimize the screen, don't lose the screen, please don't lose the screen. Sorry, just give me a second. Yeah, I minimize the screen and I make it smaller. Because we use something like a grid, it can kind of like adapt really well. It's very responsive in that sense. And it doesn't like lose its overall structure as I minimize it. Okay. Yeah, so that's some of the things that we consider for basic visual design principles. It's the kind of like underlying structure that we design a website to make it look more organized, clean, easy to recognize, easy to follow, that kind of stuff. Visual hierarchy is kind of like a subset of basic visual design principles in the sense that how do we design this in order to group things together, right? So let's take links and buttons, for example, compared to monetization, right? Because we use this kind of like colored header on the left over here, sorry, colored bar on the left here, we can kind of easily group elements together, right? So we know that in these groups, right, support me links, monetization is the main title. And then because support me links is a smaller text, right? We know that these are like subheadings or like these have minor information. You expand it further, you can find even more, subtext to describe what the subheading is or give more context essentially. And as a result, you can clearly see a hierarchy. You can kind of like picture it in your head, right? This is going to be like H1, this is going to be H2, this is going to be text, right? So if you design a website really well in such a way that it kind of feels structured, in a way like, things get progressively smaller for elements within. You have color coding of some sort. That's basically appealing to what we consider a visual hierarchy. Okay. And the final one is a very interesting kind of concept, affordances. Does anyone know what an affordance is? Or what it means when it correlates to like website design? No one want to take a shot? What the element suggested should do, user knowing what to do with that element. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, basically all of that actually. It's basically how you make an element such that it's immediately recognizable. Like it gives some kind of purpose or meaning to a user without even having to interact with it. Right? I mean, also with the interaction. So for example, how can I discern the difference between a heading and a button? Right? What's the difference between this and this? Can anyone tell me? In terms of affordance. How do I know this is not a button, but this is a button? Pointer, exactly. The cursor is a pointer, right? A pointer by kind of like basic natural instinct is something that we can program in our heads that can afford a click, essentially, right? So that's how we can tell the difference between, say, a header and a normal button of sorts, right? Likewise, how do I know that get premium here is a button compared to the rest of the text? Other than the cursor being the pointer. Maybe that's not the best example. Okay, actually, maybe this is better. There's a border and highlights. Yeah, exactly. There's a border and highlights. The better way of doing this is if you actually made it a bit more 3D, like you gave it a bit of a shadow. Because if you think about it, buttons, 3D elements that we see on a screen, on a 2D screen, right? We know for a fact can be clicked or can depress essentially. So if you made like gave it a bit of a shadow when you clicked on it, it kind of infers in your brain that, oh yeah, this is a button, so I can click on it because it's 3D essentially, right? You can also find it in symbols. For example, how do we know that this is a text? This is kind of like referring to text as opposed to anything else. How do I know that this is going to give me messages? What's like a little indication? The larger box is a shadow when you hover over it. Yeah. I guess it's just, that's more of a visual flair. It doesn't really do too much for affordance. You know what I mean? But how do I know for a fact this is going to give me like messages? Does anyone know? Can anyone give me like one pinpoint signal that this is going to be obviously a message box? The symbol. What about the symbol? It has a message icon. Yeah, exactly. It has a message icon. And this is kind of like, yeah, like your friend says, its icons are related to the real world things, right? You see a small number at the top right here that kind of like mimics what you see on like Facebook or like when you're on your phone nowadays. Might as well, actually, you might as well take that into consideration. Beforehand, affordances had to be designed so they can mimic the real world because back then, you know, technology was relatively primitive and we needed to find ways to communicate to everyone that, hey, this is an exit button or this is this is a, you know, sign up button, right? But nowadays, because our whole life is considered consumed by technology, we can actually even say like digital elements now can be affordances in themselves because we've seen this signal, this symbol right here, so many times in terms of messaging services. We know that that one right here indicates that a new message has been put up. So I know I can kind of like program in my head that this is going to give me some kind of message service, right? Even the messaging service looks very similar to Google and such. So I want you guys to just spend some time maybe breaking this down. Let's go with basic visual design principles. Let's just do this all together. Why not? Can anyone give me the basic visual design principles that this does really well and this maybe needs improvement on? Just shoot ideas. So I can give you guys one. Right now, the header is fixed at the top. So I never have to scroll all the way back up just to access the other elements within the actual page itself. So that's a pretty good visual design because I don't have to, it allows me to just, you know, move on to the next slide or sorry, next slide, next piece of information whenever I need to. Very clean and minimal. Yeah, that's also something to definitely consider. There's not a lot of information everywhere all at once. And sorry, it's very clear about what each refers to. What each element refers to. Sorry, excuse me. Cool. So like I said before, everything is in a grid or in a table. So if you put elements in a table, it's very much programmed in your mind that you're like, okay, you read it left to right. If you want elements for support me links, you know that these correlate to that, right? And not to mention it's very clean. It looks very nice, very easy to read. You know, you could alternatively just put these as like text boxes, all separated by a p tag, for example. But that would like fill up the entire screen and it'd be really hard to read. Yeah, good. Structure and layout is good. As a content and design in a way that's logical. Yeah, header then content. Good, exactly. Everything just seems to make sense, right? Everything doesn't seem, nothing seems out of place. You feel like you can traverse through this website, no issue, right? Maybe you need to read some information about it, but in terms of traversal, no issue whatsoever, right? Cool. When it comes to visual hierarchy, as we said before, the way that the sidebar here is color coded to map each section of the page is really good because that way we know for a fact this association with the heading, essentially. So there's never like unclear that the heading is not associated with, like, say, monetization is associated with RSS. There's no kind of like confusion with that. Or likewise, yeah, down there. So the changing of font sizes is also something to consider as well. Again, it just gives you some kind of like ordering that you understand. Does anyone else have anything to say regarding that? Yeah. You can say like anything you want, honestly, when it comes to this. This is just like how we consider what do we, this is kind of like looking into the studies of what we consider a good designed website. Because like, let me just show you a bad example of a bad website. Bad UI examples. Let's see. Nope, nope, no, no, no. Bad UI websites. Okay, cool. Let's take a look at this website, for example, if we had to access this website, right? Nothing makes sense here. Nothing is ordered. Nothing kind of like puts meaning to anything. It feels like just someone just randomly jumbled divs and folders together. Think about it this way. Someone had to actively design it to look like this somehow, some way, when it's a lot easier nowadays to organize it in such cleaner fashion, essentially, right? But on top of that, there's color coding everywhere. I don't know what the color coding refers to. Yeah, get fired from this website. This is what websites used to be like in the old days, honestly. You know what I mean? Old days, I'm like sub 2000. But yeah, there's color coding that makes no sense. I don't know where to click. I don't know what the purpose of clicking on these do. I can probably infer that you're gonna sell it to me or something like that, but nothing is categorized well, Like, why is there a pool thing associated with a road, like a car and a flying jetpack from the looks of things? Yeah, nothing really makes sense there. We've obviously, evolved since then to design something similar to this, but yeah. Okay, someone sent me another one. Ah, cool. So yeah, this is another website where, again, in anything, this is probably a case of like visual overload rather than good visual design. Always be careful with animations. Animations by nature are very distracting. You should try to minimize animations as much as possible where you can. Not to mention it's not always like the most, it's not always supported. But yeah, I mean, give credit to this one. At least it organizes the cars into one area, and they actually react to the mouse. So they have some, semblance. And it's categorized over here. I'm complimenting this, but this is still a bad website. But yeah, these are just some things to consider when it comes to designing a website. And last but not least, affordance. I think we've already talked through it enough. Buttons should, when you highlight a button, maybe you should change the color of the button just so that you can indicate that the user is hovering over it. And then again, change it to pointer because pointer infers that you're going to click on it. Let me think. The messaging service, as I've said before, again, just because there's an icon, a small icon with the number 1, kind of indicates to you that this is like a messaging service of some sort. So I already know what the purpose of this click on this button will do, essentially. Let me think. Yeah, it's really hard to kind of like talk about affordances without like going into psyche. Let's just look at some images. Let's look at some images of affordances. All right. So how Apple designs their icons is really smart, right? You just put an actual icon associated with each of the elements that you think will work, right? So mail makes sense, phone makes sense. Maybe web browser is a bit of a stretch with the compass, but it could infer that you're trying to look for something or you're trying to find information about something. So that's something to consider. But yeah, the easiest example is what we see in icons, but it can be like a whole bunch of other stuff, it can be Like, yeah, like it can be subtle stuff like how you do the button, for example, where you highlight over it and then it'll actually change color and stuff like that.